today we're back talking about the UFC, and particularly talking about Dana White and what happens when he retires, because, all people do retire or eventually pass away and move on. But I think that Dana White is actually going to retire and not necessarily be a lifer like Bob Arum is on the side of boxing, who will probably promote until he passes away. Bless his heart. But Dana White has shown sort of an increasing disinterest in the product and sort of laziness in his interviews recently. He recently snapped on a reporter who asked him a totally sort of normal, banal question about possible upcoming matchups. In recent interviews, he has been sort of unable to name fighters that excite him or really sort of be able to promote a card effectively, I would say. And it has me interested in the question of who will replace him, because he is 57 years old. He's made over like $500 million, it seems. And with all of those things, you'd think that there's some incentive to leave. There's two other reasons I really think that he's going to be looking for a way out as well. One, it was widely reported in 2022, and longtime fans of the UFC could see this in his physical appearance, but he had a health professional tell him that he had 10 years left to live with his current lifestyle. He was 5'11" at the time. He still is 5'11", but he was like 250 pounds, 240 pounds. Apparently he's lost like 30 to 50 pounds, and it's now around like 200 to 290 pounds. He got in shape. He got on a lot of steroids. Not a lot of steroids, but he got in shape, and he had pharmaceutical help doing that. And if you have a health professional tell you you have 10 years to live, and you believe it to the degree in which you're going to make all these radical lifestyle changes, if you do all that, certainly you don't think you have, suddenly now you have 30 years to live. That would just sort of be kind of insane. But the point is, if you really think you only have 10 years to live and you've made all those radical lifestyle changes, okay, that was 4 years ago. Now you have 6 years to live. Are you going to spend 6 years? Okay, maybe health improvements helped out a lot. Now, maybe you still have 10 years to live, but are you going to spend those 10 years just trying to remember names of fighters on undercards that you don't really care about? All the legends that you watched and saw come up and you had hype about, or you tried to get over to your league but failed to, like Fedor, like they've all come and gone. The stars that he's tried to build up organically have sort of come and gone. I don't think Sean O'Malley's gonna win another belt. I don't think we're gonna have, maybe I'm blanking on somebody, but another Dana White Contender Series guy win a belt. I don't see anyone on the horizon right now to do that. Did they give Gable Stevens a Dana White Contender Series? If they did, maybe him, but no one else. And so, if you've only got a couple of years left to live, why is he going to use all that time, when he doesn't have the passion he once had? And it's quite obvious he doesn't have the passion he once had. Another thing on a business sense is that I think Dana White is a huge ego, and he wants to go out as the pinnacle and top of UFC. And I think that the Paramount deal that they currently have, or Paramount's paying them, I believe, $1.1 billion a year, may very well represent the peak of mixed martial arts and MMA for some time. There are a lot of statistics that show that MMA might be peaking. Fewer and fewer MMA events are sort of happening each year. The UFC definitely has a superstar problem, and I would say interest in general has waned. And so, given that Paramount's also widely reported to have overpaid, it's very likely, or in my mind, it's very likely that in 2023 they could be getting maybe close to the same or a little bit less money for a deal, or be having to, get more money but make, hopefully, structural changes to pay the fighters more. But either way, I think that the next deal is going to be a lot messier, and that Dana White probably wants to extricate himself from the situation before that so he can be associated with the very peaks of MMA and not the decline of MMA. And I think for that egotistical reason, he'll probably want to leave and get out and, go spend his $500 million with his family living the good life, as, I think any of us would want to do. And it leaves the question of who would take over for him. I think that given how close UFC and WWE are these days, both being owned by TKO, the same company, people would hope that some sort of weird incestuous handover could happen in the UFC, like how it happened in WWE, where Triple H was able to both be a character that fans were familiar with for a very long time, actually marry into the McMahon family, which had controlled everything, obviously. And then once Vince McMahon was pushed out, sort of seamlessly come in as a face that fans already knew and trusted to run the product and understand, how wrestlers and that narrative strategy structure all worked. Obviously, that does not work out in the UFC, as Dana White has not had his family marry any fighters. And the UFC also hasn't really kept around old fighters, many of them in many front-facing positions for them to use. So you couldn't have a figure like Triple H come in. I think some fans had in mind Daniel Cormier, DC, because he is the most prominent UFC fighter who the company has kept in sort of public-facing positions. He does a lot of commentary. He's a through and through a company man. He'll defend them at any turn. But I don't think he's really quite quick or savvy enough to deal with all of the sort of media irregularities and bizarre situations you can encounter if you are the front-facing person at the UFC. I think what really changed my mind about this was that weird sort of Don Jr. Instagram hack controversy that happened at the White House card, where there was images that it looked like Don Jr. was asking if fighters were hurt, or DC essentially texted something or showed screenshots intimating that happened, and then said he was hacked. But the whole response was so ham-fisted that it really made me believe that he would not be a good face for that. And I don't know if the company will start trotting out sort of C-suite executives or people to try to get fans familiar with a new face. But it's very interesting that boxing is this sort of nebulous entity. They still have their promoters very front-facing, and because it's not just, one promoter, it's tons of different promoters, they can go in and out and have all these different people. But UFC is a singular entity, basically has just had Dana White as its front-facing promoter since, it was owned by the Fertittas. And once he's gone, it's going to seem even more like a soulless corporation unless they can replace him with somebody who has some degree of fan trust. And if you've listened this long, I'd love to see if you have any suggestions of who that could be, because I don't. And I'm extraordinarily curious to see what the UFC would look like without Dana White.